Okay, folks, today I'm going to do a stack. And the stack starts out with a book by Erskine Childers called The Riddle of the Sands. It's a spy thriller. Pretty good book. That's all I'm going to say about it. It's very interesting, entertaining, not necessarily very deep. But it's probably, as the blurb says, the first espionage novel, major espionage novel, modern, written. Next up is a very entertaining history, Herodotus, however you want to say it, the histories. Basically, this involves the Greeks, deals a lot with the Persian incursions into Greece, and it talks about the Persian customs and stuff like that, their culture and all that. And it's pretty good stuff. Really lengthy. You get Themistocles, Leonidas, Galen of Syracuse. Really good stuff. I like it. Herodotus. Okay, next up, Arnold Bennett, The Old Wives' Tale. I've read better novels. I've read worse novels. This came out in 1911. Modern Library Edition. Blasta Clichy, Mr. Bennett wrote. And it is a pretty good and lengthy book. And that's all I'm going to talk about right now. A lot of intrigue. Pretty neat stuff. Next up is a book that I might have to bargain Bennett. Give it away to someone who might like to read it. I read it a long time ago. The Adventures of Algae March by Sal Bellow. Me. Not very good. Just didn't take to it. And look, there's your room number there. I should call that number and see whose it is. It's pretty interesting that that's there. A room number and a name. That's all on Mr. That one. Okay. Then we have a pretty good book by John Hersey called Hiroshima. And it's a story of 6 human beings, like it says, and how an atom bomb over Hiroshima, that atrocious act that was not needed. The Japanese were already ready to surrender. Again, this is a very, very important book, and I think everyone should read it. It's not that long, but it's full of pertinent information and stories that perhaps will open your eyes to things. It's really neat. Can't recommend it enough. Really, really good. Okay, here we go. Bram Stoker, Dracula. I read this book last year. When I went into it, I didn't think that it would be as good as it was. I mean, you got all the movies and all the popular culture stuff, and you sort of erodes away any of the respect you have for the tradition. The book is very different, of course, than a lot of the movies and stuff. It's very well written. It's very well done. And it's a very serious novel. And it's not a really... I just want to say that the character of Dracula is drawn up very seriously. It's not a whimsical thing. And it's really, really a well-written novel, well-structured and everything. It's really neat. I hope people just don't get lost in as I did, and the the cultural exposure that we've had to that, to Dracula and all the movies and stuff, and the vampirism and all that. Okay, next up is a book by Ahmet Hamdi Tanpınar called The Time Regulation Institute. This is a book about what its title states. The main character runs the Time Regulation Institute. Ahmet Hamdi Tanpınar was Turkish. This is a Turkish novel. And Istanbul figures heavily in the book and is a really important character in the book. That whole area, the Bosporus and all that. And it is a really, really intriguing and fascinating novel to read. That's all I'm going to say. I'd recommend it to anybody who likes good novels. It's very, very good. I even like this little the illustration at the beginning. It's really nice. Okay, here we go with another book. That's a very interesting book from the Middle Ages, late Middle Ages, I believe. Let me see. Yeah, I would say Middle Ages, in the 11th century A.D. Hildegard of Bingen, selected writings. Some mysticism, some songs, teachings on the church, songs for Saint Rupert, redemption. Again, I like works like this. It's not necessarily, there's some mysticism in it, but it's more about faith and stuff like that, and it's very interesting. She was a musician. She's a Benedictine nun, poet, and musician. German, of course. And a very fascinating work. I would recommend it to anyone, regardless of your faith or lack of faith. It's still a very interesting book, especially the historical data that it contains. Of course, it wasn't written as a history, but it just has data about her daily goings on. Okay, next up, Aidan Higgins, wherever you want to, Language Go Down. This is an Irishman. This is a novel. I have yet to read it, and clearly the best Irish novel since At Swim Two Birds and the novels of Beckett. That's a pretty good book. It's a good taker. He quotes from Finnegan's Wake and other stuff, and this is a good novel. I mean, it's not bad. It's about a love affair with a self-centered German scholar. And a respected Irish family with four daughters. Going back to the early 20th century immigrant tales of immigrants coming in from Ireland. Okay, here we go with a really interesting book, The Rise and Fall of the House of Medici, great family. As the name indicates, they started out as doctors, but then they became pawnbrokers because their coat of arms was three balls, I believe, and that's the sign of a pawnbrokers way back in the Middle Ages and the early Renaissance. By Christopher Hibbert. Hibbert's a good historian. This is a really good book, and I like the plates, of course, of the figures. Cosimo di Giovanni de Medici, Cosimo de Medici, of course, the great Cosimo. And you got Lorenzo coming up, yeah. Il Magnifico. Excellent history. Good backdoor tales about things that are not generally written about in histories. Well researched, well done. Copious notes, which are always a pleasure. And the book is in rough shape because I read it while traveling. And got the worst of it. Sorry to say. But it's still handy and it can still be read. It's a fine volume, published by Athenaeum. Jerome Bloom, Lord and Peasant in Russia from the 9th to 19th century. And this is a history of peasantry in Russia. And it's fascinating work. You wouldn't think it would be fun to read about peasants from the 9th and 19th century. But they had a very interesting history in Russia. And I'm glad that I could still read this book at this time. I don't know if next year if that'll be the case. With all the money we're dumping into Ukraine to fight a proxy war against said nation. And we're willing to arm neo-Nazis and stuff like that. Always a good thing. Okay, next up is a rather weighty tome. Patricia Highsmith. It contains The Talented Mr. Ripley, Ripley Underground, and Ripley's Game. 3 novels in the series of the Ripley series. And I have yet to read this. Of course, I've seen the movie The Talented Mr. Ripley, and I just couldn't stand looking at Matt Damon's face that long, and I just had to turn it off. But I imagine, as always, the book is better than the movie. It's only rare that a movie is better than the book. It does happen sometimes. And I look forward to reading this when I get time. But I have yet to read it, but I'm glad I have it. I've heard a lot of good things about Highsmith from people that I respect. I don't know if they respect me or not, but that's no matter. Okay, next up is a huge volume of the novels and tales of Nathaniel Hawthorne. And it contains everything. All the novels, Scarlet Letter, House of the Seven Gables, The Blacktail Romance, The Marble Fawn, of course, the late unfinished work. And, of course, all from the Twice Told Tales, Mosses from an Old Man's. He's really into alliteration with some of his titles. And Snow Image. Again, I like Hawthorne. I think he's an excellent American writer. And I'm glad I have this volume. I've read, of course, much of the tales, but I have yet to read any of his novels. And I look forward to doing so. Okay, next up is a rather curious work by Thomas Hobbes. The curmudgeon he was, but I think he had a sense of humor. And this book, is called Behemoth, or The Long Parliament. And basically, it's a history of, in English, it's a historical work about the Long Parliament and his analysis of it. Part philosophical, part history. It's a philosophical history. And he gets behind what's motivating certain characters and certain parties and stuff like that. And then what's going on, and there's dialogues interpolated. Matter of fact, it's a dialogue work. And it's pretty interesting stuff. Hobbes is always interesting no matter what you think about him. Always interesting. Now we get to a classic novel. This one I read probably 7 or 8 years ago. Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. And this is a magnificent work. God, can't be clear. Oh, well, maybe the title page. Irene Zipser. There you go. See, that's focused. And it's translated from the French by Victor Hugo. This is a modern library edition. Les Miserables. The preface is very short. We appreciate him for that. But the book, of course, is quite the doorstop. It is huge and rewarding. It is worth the journey. Great characters like Jean Valjean and all the other ones, Marius, Cosette and just Fontaine and all of it. It's just great stuff. Also, his little asides about convents in Paris and stuff like that. The detail is just amazing. He really spent a lot of energy on this book. Saint Denis, yes, Marius. Great book, great book, great book, great book. Great book. Okay, next up, book by Richard Hughes. About a guy on a steamship, Archimedes. And a great Englishman. He was, of course, Welsh, but he was born in England. And if you tell a Welsh person, well, what's the difference? They'll say, well, Wales is different than England. This is called In Hazard, and it's about it's an adventure book about a modern merchant steamship picking up goods along the eastern seaboard of the United States before making a run to China. A little overloaded, perhaps. And it's a very good book. It gets swept up in a hurricane, and it's an hazard, and it's an adventure novel, and it's very good. Recommend it. Another one by Richard Hughes, A High Wind in Jamaica. And basically it is what it's about. A tale of seduction and betrayal, of accommodation and manipulation, of weird humor and unforeseen violence, exploration of the nature and limits of innocence. It's pretty good. As one of the blurbs says, it's primal. And it is. Richard Hughes is a good novelist. Especially his Against the Grain series, or whatever it's called. The Wooden Shepherdess and Something Up in the Attic is really good. Okay, next up is a book, Things I Don't Know, a memoir by Robert Hughes, another guy called Hughes. And this is a really good book. Really good. Mostly about everything under the sun. History, art, Christian liturgy, stuff like that. A really good book, really interesting, all over the place, but it has a theme throughout that he keeps faithfully. Okay, this is a great book about the siege of the Commune, 1871, The Fall of Paris by Alistair Horn. An excellent novel of everything that went on, the massacres, the Commune and stuff, and the fall of France, and then the reaction to it. Really good stuff. A lot of the prints of the time and the newspapers about it. Really good stuff. Great history. Okay, another great history by Alistair Horn is next up. A Savage War of Peace, Algeria, 1954 to 1962. Alistair Horn, and again, excellent analysis of de Gaulle and his adventurism, and not only in Algiers and in Algeria, but also how it's going over in France. It's a really excellent history, and that's all I'm going to say. It's great. It's a weighty tome. I mean, it's nearly 600 pages. It's over 600 pages, including the table of contents. It's good work. Okay, last but not least, and this is the end of the stack. This will be the end of my work for the day. Is Hesiod's The Works and Days, Theogony, and The Shield of Heracles, all poems of Hesiod. And it's translated by that great Greek scholar, Richard Lattimore. And there's illustrations. And this is done by Ann Arbor Press, and they're really good with their work. And good stuff. Really neat. Someone had it before me. Here's some of the illustration. Really neat stuff. And these are all poetic works, and it's very good stuff. Highly recommend it. Hesiod, however you want to pronounce it. I think that's how you pronounce it. If you don't, then I will be castigated by someone. And that's it for today, folks. Hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Take care.